Brownsville, Brooklyn. The shop on Tompkins Avenue smells like lemon drops, paraffin, and floor wax. Behind glass jars of barley sticks sits a small velvet bear, 2 palms wide. Rose Mitchom cut it from a remnant on the kitchen table, turned the limbs with a butter knife, stuffed them with excelsior until the shape felt honest, and sewed shoe button eyes tight so they wouldn't wander. Morris prints 2 words on a card and slides it into the window: Teddy's bear. By noon, it's gone, not stolen, sold. A woman buying chocolates for Sunday dinner asked the price, smiled, and left with a bag that rustled and a story she could tell in one breath. "The president spared a bear. This one's for my niece." She asked if Roosevelt approved. Morris said the sign said enough. He told her to come back tomorrow. That night, Rose doubled her stitches and made another. Word outran inventory. A newsboy pointed between editions. A clerk from the dry goods counter told his sister on the trolley. 2 schoolchildren pressed their faces to the glass and fogged half the pane. The second bear left, then the third. Rose's fingertips roughened. Morris started a list of names and coins on a scrap he tucked beside the register. They weren't toy moguls. They were local merchants with a line. Morris knew the edge he was walking, so he wrote to the only desk that could close the door. "Mr. President, may we use your name for a stuffed bear we make?" The reply that returned was warm and careful. "Thanks for the sentiment, no endorsement. It wasn't a license and it wasn't a threat. It was space. That was enough." The card stayed. Orders outpaced hands. Rose brought in a neighbor to finish seams and ladder stitch closings invisible. They worked by lamplight while the kettle hissed. Rose shortened a muzzle, rounded paws, reinforced neck seams so heads held up when children tugged. She marked the order of operations on a slip. Limb, body, head, join, close. She taught 2 young women, paid cash on Fridays, and set standards that didn't wobble even when she was tired. Eyes level, noses straight. No ear tilt that suggested worry, unless it was intentional. Morris drove the other half of the bet. He took a sample downtown wrapped in brown paper and pitched to a buyer at Butler Brothers like a man describing a window he could already see. "You won't need to explain it. Put the card beside it. Mothers want something they can hand a child that feels like kindness." The buyer didn't ask about stitches. He asked how many by Thanksgiving. Morris swallowed and said they'd make the numbers. They named the new door Ideal Novelty and Toy Company because the kitchen table had turned into a factory that needed a name people could write on checks. It wasn't a plant yet. It was a rented floor with tables in rows and a bell that marked breaks. Morris learned the boring power of fast paper, purchase orders that were legible, delivery notes that matched the count, invoices that didn't smudge. He said yes to everything that didn't break the week. Church bazaars, school fairs, charity tables, special ribbons for a political rally that wanted blue bows on 100 small bears. Then a crate arrived at a friend's wholesaler and reset the baseline. Inside, jointed mohair bears with a stance. Heads turned and stayed, arms lifted and held an angle. The price was higher. The effect in a window was a magnet. Morris handled one and understood in a second that his soft-bodied pattern would have company on the same shelf. He didn't panic. He adapted. Ideal would keep its softer line for budgets and hugs, and, where possible, add jointed bears sourced under terms that didn't drown a small firm. He asked factories for samples, felt the discs through the cloth, and learned to tell good torque from loose with a thumb's press. The White House stayed politely distant, and that helped more than any contract could. Without a license to police, the name slid into common speech. Ideal embraced the part they could control: supply, standards, delivery. When a department store wanted 100 small bears arranged as a choir with red ribbons by Saturday, Ideal stacked boxes on a wagon, rattled the streets to make the deadline, and earned a buyer's phone call the next week. Momentum isn't a feeling, it's a schedule met. Here's the human scene that proves the math. On a hot Thursday, Rose stood at the head of 2 long tables, lifting each bear by the head, then the shoulders, then the hips, checking balance and expression the way bakers check crust. She set aside the outliers for fixing and praised the lot quietly so the rhythm didn't break. Workers laughed about landlords and lunches. The bell rang. Hands kept moving a few beats longer because they wanted to finish the bundle. Press noticed, briefly but effectively. A neighborhood column ran a paragraph on immigrants turning a national story into a local success. It wasn't a profile. It was a flare that caught a buyer's eye uptown. Orders thickened. Payroll followed. Rent on a bigger floor became reasonable. A sign that once hung in a candy window moved upstairs over a door with a bell that sounded like a future when it opened. Two streams flowed through the city now, German-jointed bodies with buttoned ears coming through importers, and the Michtoms American line that matched the mood at price points families could reach. Customers didn't choose sides, they chose occasions. A mohair-jointed bear with posture for a parlor. A softer ideal bear for a child who would sleep with it. The shelf didn't care who invented what. It cared whether a passerby smiled and reached. That was the bet, stripped of romance. Keep the name on the card without a license. Scale sewing into wages. Move fast enough to ride the story while it was still warm. They didn't own the myth. They owned their promises. And they kept them night after night while the kettle hissed and the thread burned a little under their fingers. The naming, arms race. The shelves are crowded now, jointed mohair from Germany with a dignified stance, soft-bodied American cousins built for beds. What ties them together is a single syllable spreading like ivy, Teddy. Newspapers print it reflexively. Catalogs tuck it into captions. Store ledgers jot Teddy's 12 in margins as if it were flour or thread. The word moves faster than any contract because no one owns it. That's the twist that decides the season. Roosevelt won't license his nickname. The White House replies to requests with courtesy and distance. That leaves retailers with a field wide open and a shared instinct. Print the name big, sell fast, ask permission from no one. Cards read, teddy bears, assorted sizes. Window placards riff on Berriman's cartoon without ever claiming approval. Usage turns the nickname effectively generic by 1906 because language follows mouths, not lawyers. Imports arrive plain, model numbers on paperwork, no prominent maker marks yet. Jobbers uncrate 55 PBs, sit them upright, tie a ribbon, and slide a Teddy tag underneath. It isn't deception, it's alignment. The public has already named the category. The tag helps a story find a price. American makers adapt by feel. Jointing spreads, pins, and discs at shoulders and hips for a clean sit, neck sets that let a head cock. Shoe-button eyes give way in many shops to glass that catches light. Noses get a consistent stitch, so face is read as intentional instead of accidental. Patterns migrate across neighborhoods in paper envelopes. One trims a muzzle, another raises ears, a third widens hips so a bear sits solid on a shelf without leaning. It's a design commons, accelerated by demand. Patent law can't corral any of this. You can protect a specific mechanism. You can't fence a silhouette half the city can draw from memory. And you definitely can't lock down a nickname that the papers and the public toss around like weather. Executives mutter about trademarks they can't articulate. Lawyers draft letters they don't send. In practice, the lack of ownership functions like a growth engine. If everyone can call it Teddy, everyone can prosper. Culture supercharges the name. Sheet music hums, postcards flirt, vaudeville sketches nod toward a timid cub. The bear's outline becomes shorthand for tenderness with a wink. Families don't need instructions. They buy the mood the way you buy flowers. Ginjan listens in its own way. Notes from buyers mention softer faces, brighter eyes. Steiff iterates, shorter snouts, lighter mohair, a subtle curve at the mouth seam, ear placement tweaked by a few millimeters to invite instead of impress. They're not chasing copycats, they're shaping demand they helped unlock. The factory's precision adjusts to sentiment like a lens finding focus. On this side, domestic firms push polish and pace. Some experiment with chest labels, paper medallions glued to fur, so a returning customer can ask for the one with the little shield. Others compete on volume and delivery windows. The arms race isn't legal, it's operational. Who can fill a department store's Thanksgiving order? Who can replenish a window by Saturday morning after a Friday rush? Which mill can guarantee a cinnamon shade in time for a parade display? Here's the human scene that explains the stakes. A buyer in Milwaukee flips a catalog, skimming 3 line drawings that look nearly identical. He circles the one that can ship by the 15th and keep its head up under a child's hand. He scribbles teddy bears on the order because that's what customers say at the counter. The maker name is a footnote. The category name is the sale. Then imitation bites hard enough that identity needs hardware. Steiff answers with a small round promise, a button in the ear, registrable and defendable, not the nickname, an origin mark. Clerks tap it with a fingernail and say, "These are the good ones." The communal name keeps the lane wide. The button gives one house a shoulder to lean on in the crowd. Copyists counter with speed and price. They don't win every shelf, they win enough Saturdays. Domestic jointed bears hit budget. Steiff can't always reach after freight, duties, and margins. Windows mix both without apology, buttons for those who ask, softer budgets for those who don't. Consumers don't file briefs. They choose a face, a feel, and a number they can live with. Advertising adopts the myth as a serviceable truth. Hang tags carry a 20-word parable about Roosevelt's refusal. Catalogs show 3 sizes seated neatly, a caption winking at Mississippi. Nobody claims exclusive rights to the feeling. Everybody claims a share of the traffic it brings. By season's turn, the arms race has a stable logic. The name belongs to the crowd. Storytelling belongs to anyone who can stage it cleanly. Differentiation lives in marks, materials, delivery promises, and faces that meet a gaze. The teddy bear isn't a single brand. It's a lingua franca, and the fluency that matters is speed, reliability, and a look that makes a passerby stop for half a breath and then reach. Engineering cute. From predators to plush. The first wave looked like they'd stepped out of a circus ring. Upright, long-snouted, shoe-button eyes that read as watchful more than warm. In a window, that stance impressed. In a child's arms, it hesitated. The hand delivered feedback long before surveys did. Buyers wrote notes that got right to it. Shorter muzzle, lighter pile, eyes that catch light, bellies that yield to a hug. Each line item was a lever. Pull them all and the bear changes species, from specimen to companion. Jinjin had the tools to move fast without sloppiness. Richard lifted the head pattern and trimmed the snout just enough to bring the eye line forward. He lowered the brow angle a breath, which softened the stare. He tried honey and wheat mohair that drank daylight instead of throwing it back like varnish. On the bench, glass eyes replaced some shoe buttons where price and safety allowed. On other SKUs, buttons stayed but grew a size to hold a glint. Ear placement crept a few millimeters higher. A line of black satin thread stitched into the nose, with a tiny vertical break, suggested a philtrum and quietly kindness. American workrooms iterated in parallel, passing discoveries across tables like recipes. A forewoman in Newark layered Excelsior with a cushion of cotton at the chest so a squeeze had a soft landing. A home sewer in Queens learned to brush pile forward at the muzzle to fake fullness without extra fabric. A Newark mill offered a brushed plush that felt less like upholstery, more like a blanket fresh from a line. Small changes, repeated everywhere, built momentum. Posture shifted next. Early bears marched, new ones learned to sit. Hip cuts widened so bellies could rest naturally. Shoulder seams dropped a hair so arms draped instead of saluting. Heads gained a trace of asymmetry so a clerk could tip one ear closer to the glass and make passers-by feel seen. Sitting mattered for something beyond mood. Shelves looked fuller and calmer when the figures held themselves without props. A tidy row of seated bears turned plate glass into an invitation. Safety entered as craft, then hardened as expectation. Metal discs pinch when joints were sloppy, washers loosened if thread weights were wrong. Makers tucked joint hardware deeper, tightened tolerances, and tested spin under stress with a thumb and 2 fingers until smooth was muscle memory. Some swapped glass for firmly anchored stitched eyes on smaller sizes. Stuffing recipes adjusted too. Wood wool kept shape, but mixes added a gentle give that didn't scratch. The task was simple to say and hard to do. Hold a pose on a shelf, collapse into an embrace, never hurt a hand. Here, where engineering slid into psychology without anyone giving it a name. Cute isn't luck, it's a system of cues. Bigger eyes signal youth and need. Softer textures cue care. Rounded features lower perceived threat. Makers, watching who reached and who didn't, learned to tune attachment in millimeters. A muzzle shaved a shade, an ear lifted a touch, a warmer dye bath that cleared a shelf by noon. Adjust so, adjust again. Leveraging attachment, projection, and perceived safety to turn objects into companions. Steiff codified preference into SKUs. A notch on an internal pattern meant ear high, a suffix signaled lighter pile, a ledger note locked joint torque for the run. The button in ear would soon do the public work of identity. These quiet codes did the private work of repeatability. Domestic firms matched the tempo with chest labels and hang tags that carried a 20-word promise. Teddy waits for you. So a softened face arrived preloaded with intent. Departments refined display like stagecraft. The stern long snouts moved to collector tables, the rounder faces sat at child height. Clerks learned a micro choreography, turned 3 heads 5 degrees left at opening, right after lunch straight at dusk. Dwell time rose. Children pressed both hands to the glass. Parents followed their eyes. Hospitals noticed something else. Children in pain held the rounder bears longer. Volunteers called down to gift shops for more of the soft ones with the listening faces. Charity fairs saw the same. The friendlier profiles left tables early, and donors gave a bit more when a bear waited in a basket. Use was writing spec. Makers responded with materials that matched the job. Washable blends reduced worry for parents and wards. Growlers, once tuned to bark, softened to a murmur that lived at the edge of hearing. Stitch maps shifted stress off the neck seam so heads didn't wobble under repeated hugs. Even the way fur parted around the eye mattered. A clean reveal kept the gaze bright after a week in a child's bed. The myth did quiet work in the background, but the face did the closing. A hangtag's Mississippi rhyme nudged sentiment. The bear's expression sealed it. The moment a head tipped into curiosity rather than challenge, nurseries replaced parlors as the natural habitat. Parents who'd hesitated at sharp muzzles picked up the revised forms and didn't put them back. By decade's end, the category held two truths at once. Collectors sought elders with long snouts and strict posture. Children formed bonds with rounder cousins who listened. Both sold. Only one slept on pillows every night. Engineering cute didn't dilute the icon. It expanded its job description, from display to daily service, from talking piece to keeper of secrets. And once a bear learned to steady a room, the room kept it close. The myth becomes marketing. Department stores turned glass into a stage. Pine boughs framed a painted swamp, a camp stool sat empty, and a toy rifle leaned aside while neat ranks of bears faced the street. In the corner, a placard echoed Berriman's lettering, drawing the line in Mississippi. Before doors opened, a clerk tipped every head a few degrees as if the bears were listening. Passers-by didn't need the story explained. The tableau offered a feeling they already knew they wanted to take home. Children dragged parents inside. Adults bought for parlors and for the comfort of agreeing with a decent decision. The bear became a small way to vote for restraint without a ballot. Window dressers rotated scenes with seasonal rhythm. Autumn cypress and cardinals, winter alpine forests with lantern glow, spring picnics where a bear, not Roosevelt, sat at the blanket's edge. Each scene sold the same idea, gentleness you could hold. Printers kept pace. Children's books retold the hunt with edges sanded off. The bear was gentler, the moment tidier. Sheet music publishers moved stacks titled My Teddy and Me or The Bear That Teddy Spared. Parlors with pianos bought the story in treble clef, and when families sang, the nickname slid into bedrooms where a bear already waited on a pillow. Vaudeville added an easy laugh. An actor waved away a cardboard rifle as a tiny plush scuttled on a string. Recognition did more work than the joke. Roosevelt's staff walked a careful line. They didn't license the name or sign endorsements. They also didn't swat down store cards. Public warmth outweighed legal neatness. A small bear tucked near a lectern at a campaign stop made a photograph softer without turning the event into an ad. The White House understood optics, accept the cultural halo, refuse the cash, keep the symbol communal. Manufacturers welded story to stock at the smallest surface that mattered, the hangtag. A thumb-sized card, a neat script, a sentence or two. A president declines the easy shot, the bear is safe now. Some tags leaned sentimental, saved and safe. Others stayed jaunty, Teddy's friend. No legal claims, just a parable. The copy primed empathy and social signaling at the point of sale, so the bear's job felt obvious without ever calling it a toy. Catalogs carried the myth in ink and order numbers. An illustrated page showed 3 sizes, seated on a rail, a caption nodding to Mississippi and a price ladder that made the decision feel organized. A buyer could circle the Roosevelt kind, and the crate that arrived would play the same tune when clerks set the heads just so. The object and the story traveled together from dock to floor in a box that taught its own context. Plausible deniability was part of the craft. Press agents kept Roosevelt's name clear of overt endorsement. Makers avoided claims of exclusivity. Stores didn't pretend to have the only Teddy. Everyone sketched the outline lightly. That restraint kept trust high. Consumers bought the mood without feeling managed. The myth worked better because nobody squeezed it too hard. Material culture bloomed in the gaps between shelves. Postcards showed couples strolling with a bear tucked between them as shorthand for tenderness. Studio photographers placed a plush companion beside a toddler to coax a steadier gaze. Church bazaars lined a table with bears and pinned a clipping of Berriman's cartoon above them. A single image stitched together affection, decency, and the quick flight of money from pocket to cash box. Some makers tried to print the story on the product itself. A ribbon-stamped TR was too bold and vanished quickly. A paper chest label that said Mississippi was subtle enough to pass. Others printed a 4-line verse inside a lid, bedtime moral in miniature. The boxes were discarded. The verse stayed in parents' voices, which is where marketing performs best. Steiff's response to the crowded chorus was hardware, not prose. The button in ear arrived as a quiet note of identity. Clerks learned to tap it with a fingernail and say, "This one." The communal name kept pulling people into the lane. The button steered them to a particular counter. Domestic firms lacking a defendable hallmark doubled down on timing and reach, reliable ship dates, custom ribbons for parades, school orders filled before assemblies. Story drew traffic, operations kept it. The most effective ads happened at home. A bear sat through lullabies, rode in prams, listened to whispered troubles, and watched families argue and reconcile. Those private scenes turned into word of mouth that outperformed columns of copy. A neighbor asked where the bear came from. The answer was a gesture toward the nearest store, not a lecture about origin. Myth became marketing because living rooms kept retelling it without instruction. Newspapers finished the loop with pictures that traveled further than slogans. A photograph of a hospital volunteer handing a bear to a child did more than any paragraph about comfort. Charity drives used the image like a lever. Donations rose when a bear sat at the center of the table. Retailers clipped those images and taped them in windows. The bear became a tool that signaled care on contact. That's the moment the category locked in. The nickname was public property. The pose was a promise. The tag told a short story that fit between the door and the register. The virtues stayed quiet, empathy primed, touch rewarded, social proof visible through glass. The myth didn't just sell the bear. It taught people what to feel as their hand reached out, and the object made sure the feeling paid. Who profited, who didn't? By the first real Christmas rush, money had picked a direction. In Gingen, export payments hit Steiff's ledger like steady rain. No single bonanza, just reliable invoices. New York, Boston, Philadelphia. Marguerite approved overtime wages, ordered more mohair, and quietly planned a new wing. The Bears weren't buying yachts. They were buying windows, floors, and room to miss an order without risking collapse. Precision turned into payroll. Payroll turned into resilient. Steiff's small metal promise, the button in ear, did more than fend off imitations. It created price separation at the counter. A clerk could tap the button and ask a little more, not with a speech, but with a sound. That margin funded better tooling, steadier contracts for outworkers, and a broader line beyond bears. The myth was common property. The mark was identity paid for discipline. Across the ocean, Ideal's profits took a different shape. They showed up as rent on a bigger floor, as Friday pay in envelopes, as a wagon rattling downtown with 100 small bears that had to sing in a choir by Saturday. Morris kept promises on paper. Rose kept promises in seams. Their margin lived in speed. Ship dates met, special ribbons tied, rush orders made real. Buyers returned because the phone never rang with excuses. Roosevelt sat at the center of the symbol and outside the cash. He refused royalties and endorsements. The White House took warmth, not checks. That restraint kept the bear communal. No single maker could claim moral ownership without looking foolish. Politically, the halo mattered more than a licensing fee. He got a softer frame for a hard-nosed presidency. Clifford Berriman didn't get a cut either, but he earned durability. His cartoon, Drawing the Line in Mississippi, became shorthand in civics classrooms and editorial pages. He was the name that stuck to the origin scene when most window cards had yellowed away. The guides, the governor, the bayou, they receded. The cartoonist stayed in the caption. The invisible hands, the jobbers, profited at the margins. A point here, 2 points there, multiplied by volume. They owned routes, not warehouses. When freight snarled, they found substitutes. When tariffs bit, they shifted sources. No headlines, just steady commissions for getting the right crate to the right counter before the window changed. Copyists earned while the temperature was highest. Small shops without buttons or brand marks sold bears priced for families who couldn't go near mohair. Their profits were fragile. One bad bolt of cloth and a month evaporated, but week to week they lived where the Craze lived, in neighborhoods, at fairs, on church tables. The gray zone around Teddy fed them because no one could pull the ladder up. Who didn't profit? Anyone who tried to fence the name. Trademark law around personalities was thin, and the nickname had already slipped into newspapers, songs, and playground chants. A cease and desist couldn't reverse thousands of mouths. Private counsel told ambitious executives the truth. You'll make enemies and not much law.